Hey guys, Joe East here. Hey, I was fixing to go travel this morning, but I decided I wanted to do a quick clip on focused on young people. My son is 15 and he's starting as a freshman right now in high school, so I figured I needed to do something quick to kind of give some advice to that type of demographic, someone who's being thrown out into the world and figuring out how to navigate yourself and how best to make the decisions to where you want to go in, say, the next 10 years or 15 years. Or if you're a middle-aged person and you're like at the change of life and you want to do something different, this is also a good pointer to us to perhaps where you might take that. I've actually done it myself as I was crossing the threshold of middle age, changing my life path. Or if you're a mature adult and you're kind of in a bit of a despair and you're living for the weekends, you need to change something, because you don't want to be living for the weekends and waiting for the clock to strike 5 o'clock or whatever and get off of work. You don't want to be watching the clock. So if you're watching the clock, you probably need to think about some of these things here, because we don't want to, watching the clock is a bad thing. Okay, so you don't have to take my word for it in this advice here. However, Stephen Covey, one of the greatest writers on personal effectiveness, wrote a book called The 8th Habit, and you can see a similar diagram in that book as to this, and he gives similar explanations. I'm going to give you my explanation, personal explanation, but anyway, you can do some more research on The 8th Habit. Stephen Covey is the writer of the extremely famous book in the late 80s called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it's still a bestseller perhaps today. I think I have a copy of it on my shelf. Anyways, let's dive into some of these ideas. So this is a Venn diagram. Those of you who have studied logic or reasoning probably have run into Venn diagrams. So you have a subject, and then there's an intersection of these two subjects. So 3 subjects in kind of designing your career path or what you want to do in life. You have 3 things. One's called passion, what you're passionate about; the market, what someone's willing to pay you for; and skill set, how good are you at it. So what we want to do is in designing our high school kids being launched into life as the middle-aged people who want to switch your life path, or the fully mature adult who is working for the weekends. This is how you want to design it based on this diagram. So you want to go toward the intersection of passion, market, and skill. Again, this is easier said than done, but let's kind of illustrate how you can perhaps design your strategy as how you want to shift and get closer to the fun part of where you have the intersection of passion, skill, and market. So let's say if you have, most of us, like I said, if you are working for the weekend, you're probably highly skilled at something, or at least good enough for someone in the market to pay you for. And the intersection of market and skill is this little sector right here, which is working for the weekends. You get into a mode of despair when you think about work sometimes. Oh my God, it's Monday, right? Again, you don't want to be thinking like that about Mondays, and you don't want to be working for the weekends. That's not a good place to be. This will drive you to burnout, and you'll want to retire, and after retirement you'll be very glad, because you're not engaging your soul, because to engage your soul you have to figure out what actually engages your soul. So we're all put on this earth to do particular things, and one question I ask a lot of young people, or people who need a little bit of coaching in how to redesign their lives to where they're breathing easier, is what are you good at? Not what your mother said. Your mother will lie to you and tell you what you want to hear. So the question is, what are you good at, what your mother did not? Don't listen to your mother. Listen to maybe a close friend who's honest with you, or former bosses, or former maybe professors or something like that. If you went to college and high school, some people noticed you were really good at something, but they weren't your friends, but they said you were good at something. Pay attention to those voices, because they have no incentive perhaps to tell you what you want to hear, other than close friends. But make sure they have no incentive to tell you what you want to hear. Do not listen to your mother when you ask this question. So what are you good at? And then the second question is, that you can only answer, is what sets your soul on fire? It's like, yeah, that you kind of get that yes thing. And whenever your soul's on fire and you're in the zone of passion, here's a good rule of thumb that I like to coach people through, is that you're doing something and suddenly you lose all sense of time. It's like time just goes away, and suddenly you look at the clock and it's like, wow, time just flew by. That was so fun. That's when you're engaging your passion, you're engaging your purpose of why, the gods put you into this world. You're engaging that whenever you feel like that. Or you can do this forever, and even after, I don't want to ever retire if I'm doing this, right? I can do this when I'm 70 or 80, and I'll still be, I'll be passionate about this, right? So that's what you want to connect to whenever you're trying to figure out what sets your soul on fire. It's what you're good at and what you can do forever without stopping. You lose all sense of time because your soul is engaged in it, because you're doing what you were put on the earth to do. Now, this is not easy to execute whenever you have markets out there and people paying you for what you do, or you have to, you want to get paid for what you do. We all want to be successful and give so we can, get something in return and be successful, right? So if you're completely passionate about something and you're good at it, but there's no market, that's called a hobby, right? Nobody's going to pay you for your hobbies except your mother, all right? So, in other words, you got passion and skill, and only your mother's paying for it. Well, that's just a hobby, okay? But you want to move toward the market where you can actually get compensated for this. So, you have to start putting yourself out there more to strangers and people who don't have a vested interest of telling you what you want to hear. And get the feedback. Sometimes it might be painful, and then you got to adjust your strategy based on that feedback to tune it toward these markets here that will actually compensate you for what you're doing, for your passion and skill. So that's if you have passion and skill, you got hobbies, and you want to kind of move your hobbies toward the market. Like I said, if you're being paid for something and you're good at it, and you're working for the weekends. I think most of us have been here, and perhaps 80% of the population might be here, perhaps more, 90%. All you got to do to move toward the passion vector is you have to figure out what sets your soul on fire. I think we covered that earlier. So what if you have passion, and there's a market for your passion, but you're not good at it? So at that point, you're an apprentice. So you have to find a master to teach you the skills so you can move closer to a skill where your skills become more marketable, and your soul's on fire. People want to compensate you for this, but you're not quite good enough to get enough compensation that you're satisfied with, right? So you got to develop your skills. So that's just basically deep diving into the craft of what you're passionate about, and tune it. Make sure it's tuned into that market very well. And then deep dive into the skill level of developing that skill. Usually you're going to be studying under a master, someone who is very good at it and who is willing to show you the ropes, show you the way, etc. That's why you have senior level employees and mid-level and apprentice, entry level. If you're an electrician, you might have heard apprentice, journeyman, master electrician, etc. So you're going to run into usually 3 stages of skill set out there in crafts. So you have your first level, entry level, then your mid level, and then your master level or your senior level or whatever. Engineers have the same thing. Entry level engineers, then you have your senior engineers, and then eventually you have a staff or principal engineers. You guys might have run into that. So that's what you're going to see. So let's drive this to a conclusion so we can close this little talk out. So again, high school freshmen or high school senior maybe, middle-aged folks who are ready to make a change, or those of you who are working for the weekend. Here's a strategy to retune your life to go more towards a more fulfilling place where you can maybe crack the upper middle class, or perhaps crack into the higher classes perhaps. But you're never going to crack the upper middle class or the higher classes working for the weekends. You're not going to be watching the clock, working 50 and 80 hours a week in crack the upper middle class or the higher classes. Once you get above a certain to a certain level of working hard, or just oh my God, I'm so tired, I need a weekend, I need a vacation. Once you work so hard, you're going to reach a glass ceiling where you won't be able to get above a certain level, and you're going to be banging your head up against a glass ceiling. So you're going to have to retune your strategy and connect with your passion and break through that next level toward the upper middle class or even the higher classes. And this is just very basic stuff. I mean, you want to crack six figures, you probably got to do something like this. You can make six figures working for the weekends, but you're going to burn yourself out. And again, this is all approximations here, strategies to retune where you're headed and how to go out there and engage that passion, engage what you were put on this earth to do. So go out there and just put stuff out there, receive the feedback. Don't be afraid of the feedback. There's a saying in neuro-linguistic program that the quality of your communication is the feedback you receive. And that's one nice strategy of thinking about this right here. How do you know this is working out for you, right? It's the feedback you're receiving. Sometimes the feedback you're receiving is not the correct feedback from, say, people who might don't want to crack, the weekend sort of workers, right? You don't want to listen to that feedback, but you want to listen to the feedback of those who may be in this zone right here, right? So be careful of the feedback you take seriously, right? Okay, so let's close this out, and good luck out there, and let's go out there and make it happen. Thanks. Take care. Bye.